Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our United States Senate debate. I'm WMTW News 8 political reporter Paul Merrill. I'm joined by the three men who want to represent Maine in the U.S. Senate. They are alphabetically from left to right on your screen. State Senator Eric Brakey, the Republican nominee, Senator Angus King, the independent incumbent, and entrepreneur and teacher Zach Ringelstein, the Democratic nominee. A note about our format today. Each one of you will have 1 minute to answer a series of questions. 30-second rebuttals will be allowed at my discretion. We have a light in the studio, timed by our producer to let you know it'll turn yellow when you have 15 seconds left. We also are timing off-site as well. We'll rotate the order of the candidates answering each question. No closing statements, but we will begin with 1 minute opening statements. We're going in alphabetical order. That means, Eric Brakey, you begin with openings. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, Paul. I'm Eric Brakey, the senator who reformed welfare, passed constitutional carry, and expanded access to health care. And I believe we deserve a better deal. Angus, I'm not here to say that you're the worst of the bunch, but the fact is you're part of the Washington bunch, spending us trillions of dollars into debt. Spending us trillions of dollars into debt, sending our kids overseas to fight in wars that never end, letting governments spy on us, stealing from our paychecks and our liberties as Maine people. You know, you try to make nice with the people who are stealing from us, but after 6 years, you haven't really gotten much done, and you've only managed to enable the worst in Washington. You know, but I'm going to Washington to stand up for Maine people, for our freedoms and our tax dollars, just as I've done in Augusta. I've stood up to my own party leadership when they were wrong, and I have worked with people on both sides of the aisle to get things done, and I've never had to sacrifice my principles to do that. We deserve a better deal. We deserve a senator who's going to fight for us, and when the people send me to Washington to represent them, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Fight for the people of Maine.
Thank you. Senator King.
I was thinking this morning about last weekend, and I'm trying to recount my itinerary. I was in Dover, Foxcroft, Milo, LaGrange, Bangor, Presque Isle, Rumford. That was a long run from Presque Isle to Rumford, Brunswick, Westbrook, and back to Brunswick. That was in about 36 hours. Here's what I saw and heard, similar to what I've been hearing for years in traveling Maine as your senator. A real problem of opioids ravaging our community. A problem of seniors being anxious about health care, the cost of prescription drugs. Veterans who feel good about their care at Togus but are worried about the VA generally. Issues of the forest economy and where that's headed. But I also heard a lot of good news. Good news on the forest products front, that we're finally doing something in Washington and in Maine about opioids, that Medicare is in good shape, and that we're going to make progress on those issues. That's why I'm running again.
Thank you. Zach Ringelstein.
My name is Zach Ringelstein. I am a teacher, I am a dad, and I am the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate. And I want to level with the people of Maine today because as the son of a social worker, as someone who qualified for free and reduced lunches growing up, as the youngest of 4 brothers in a family that loves America and believes in the American dream, we have so many threats to who we are. And I just have to tell you, having jumped into the political system, I can tell you for sure that it's rigged for the ultra wealthy, that politics in this day and age is gross. It is not what I would want my children to see or be part of, and it is time that we step up when our country honestly has a serious crisis. Our crisis is that 1% of our country owns about 50% of our wealth. We have an existential threat to humankind itself, which is climate change. When the last 4 years are the 4 hottest in human history, when about 50% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency, we need change. With ranked choice voting, we can vote for the future.
Thank you. That's time. Thank you all three for being here today again, and we look forward to a spirited discussion. Again, 1 minute responses, 30-second rebuttals at my discretion. We'll try to circulate this as best I can. We're going to start. Senator King, you'll answer this first question. We'll begin by talking a little bit about the economy. Every president since Herbert Hoover has added to our national debt. Total figure is approaching $22 trillion right now, and it's projected to grow by more than $1 trillion a year. Senator King, you'll answer this first. What can you do in Congress to try to rein in spending so that future generations don't get saddled with this kind of debt?
Well, I think you got to approach it from all directions. The first thing to talk about the debt and the deficit is the biggest single hit to the debt in the last so many years, I don't know, 5, 10 years, was the unfunded tax bill that passed last December. $1.9 trillion added to the national debt, basically to benefit the largest corporations and wealthier individuals. And all the people that are wringing their hands today about the debt and the deficit they were nowhere to be found last December, and they were voting that tax cut through. In terms of what do we have to do, I've concluded, Paul, that we need to start talking about some kind of mechanism to insist that we move toward a balanced budget. Whether it's a balanced budget amendment or some kind of budget control act in Congress, which was passed in 2011, worked for a while, and then sort of has drifted away. But those are the kinds of things that we have to do. Now, I voted for appropriations bills to keep the government open. I don't apologize for that.
Thank you. That's time. Zach.
We have an immoral budget, quite frankly. We have a budget that spends so much money, almost $1 trillion, the most since the Iraq War on war, and yet we are talking about not making sure that every single American can have access to health care. We're giving $1.9 trillion through this tax bill to the ultra wealthy, and yet we are living with crumbling roads and without high-speed broadband. We are not getting what we deserve as the working people in this state. The economy is rigged for the ultra wealthy. Unfortunately, my friends on the stage are taking money from corporations and therefore can't actually represent the people of Maine. I'm the only person in this race who doesn't take corporate PAC lobbyists or fossil fuel money, and what that means is that I can represent our interests and finally give working people what we deserve.
Thank you. Eric.
Well, first of all, Zach's wrong. I haven't taken a single penny from corporate PACs. But to the point, we have a spending problem in Washington, not a revenue problem. In fact, Washington, D.C. took more tax dollars in this year than any year on record, and that's with the tax cuts that recently took place. The problem we have is a bipartisan one. You have Republicans on one side who always want to spend more on overseas spending. You have Democrats on the other side who always want to spend more on welfare spending. And then you have individuals like Angus who bring everyone together and say, let's be bipartisan and spend money on everything, and then we'll all be happy. But you know what? It's my generation that gets stuck with the bill. We're $21 trillion in debt. We have $113 trillion in unfunded liabilities. That's a bill of $1.1 million for every single American taxpayer. Compromise is the answer, but we need a different kind of compromise. We need both sides to come together and say, let's cut a little bit of what we each want. Maybe we can't afford as much for welfare spending. Maybe we can't afford as much for warfare spending. We need to look at cutting on both sides, and that's how we get a balanced budget. In Augusta, I've been one of the most fiscally conservative members, and I'll be that in Washington.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Zach. No surprise to anybody, our state is aging. Young people are leaving. If elected to the United States Senate, what can you do to help attract and keep young workers in Maine?
So first and foremost, we need high-speed broadband, not just for young people, but for all people who need to have a foothold in this economy. Quite frankly, can't have a foothold without internet for all people. Infrastructure is incredibly important, not just high-speed broadband, but also transportation systems, because people in rural Maine want to have good jobs, but jobs aren't going to come if people can't get in and out of rural Maine. We also are talking about a Green New Deal, and a Green New Deal is this idea that we can convert to 100% renewable energy by 2035. We call it a Green New Deal after Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. And the belief with our Green New Deal is that not only can we save our planet, but we can also create high-wage jobs in rural Maine. I also want loan forgiveness programs because the millennial generation is in debt, and we're not starting companies, we're not buying homes, we're not investing in the stock market. So we need loan forgiveness programs that bring people back to Maine and give them high-wage jobs.
Thank you. Eric.
So this is a huge crisis, and this is something I've been talking about this entire campaign. Our young people are leaving. They've been leaving for a long time, and the reason is lack of the better jobs that we need here in Maine. I'm actually the child of parents who were forced to leave after college, looking for better jobs in other places. This has been going on a long time. We need those better high-paying jobs, and we can do it. But the problem is big government on the state level, big government on the federal level, strangling our opportunities. Washington, D.C. is now the richest region in America, where the average income is twice replace that of Maine people. But they don't actually produce anything there. They get it all by stealing from the rest of us. I just released a jobs plan earlier today that would create better paying jobs, especially in the rural areas of our state, with economic freedom zones to cut taxes, slash taxes in the most economically depressed areas of Maine and across America, to bring capital that's overseas and offshore bank accounts home to invest in America, to rein in out-of-control regulations that are strangling job creators, and many other points. Go to our website, ericbrakey.com, and you can read the full plan there. But we need better jobs for Maine to keep our kids here.
Thank you. Angus.
I think the real question, as we all agree, is better jobs, better training, better opportunities. Let me give you just a small example. We had a crisis in the forest products industry 2 or 3 years ago. We were losing mills. We lost 3 or 4 paper mills in a couple of years. Now that's starting to come back. It's starting to come back because of a whole lot of people coming together about 1.5 years ago. The forest products industry, the loggers, the truckers, the university, the state, the federal government, the federal agencies, and we've created a momentum. I was in Bangor just a week ago talking with all the leaders of those industries. We've had more investment in the paper industry in the last year than in probably the prior 10 years. And we're seeing new products, new opportunities at the university, in the forest products industry, and I agree with Zach, broadband has got to be part of it. That's a major thrust for me. I've got a guy here in Maine on my staff who works pretty much full-time with communities developing high-speed broadband. That's crucial.
Thank you. Our next question, Eric, you'll take this one first. Clearly, there's a problem with all the mass shootings that happen in this country. If elected to the United States Senate, how would you try to solve this problem? And in giving us your answer, tell us something that would be able to draw support from both sides of the gun issue.
Well, I'll start with we should acknowledge the fact that we're doing something very well here in Maine. We're ranked the safest state in America here in Maine. And in fact, 4 out of the top 5 safest states in America are all constitutional carry states, where law-abiding citizens are able to carry for self-defense without the need for a government permit. And I'm proud of the fact that in the Maine Senate, I was the bill sponsor. I built a bipartisan coalition to bring people together to pass that. I think oftentimes, however well-intended, we launch off on these gun control proposals that frankly don't work. They haven't worked in Chicago. They haven't worked in New York. These are some of the most dangerous places in America where the most gun violence happens because criminals don't obey gun control laws, but law-abiding citizens do. We need to make sure as we're passing laws that we're not disempowering people who would use firearms for self-defense, because that's fundamental to a free society. That's why Maine is such a safe place to live, or at least a very big part of it.
Thank you. Angus.
Well, I think you've got to start talking about 2 different issues. One is guns and one is the people who use guns. I remember the NRA's motto back in the 90s, guns don't kill people, people kill people. To me, that talks about background checks, and I believe background checks have worked. The combination of universal background checks and anti-trafficking laws so that people can't circumvent the background checks, I believe, and the data is there, that it will work. And that's something I voted for, mentioned to me, the background check law back in 2013. I think that's one thing we can do. Another thing, though, if you look at the common denominator of these shootings, almost all of these people, I would say all of them by definition, have mental health issues. We spend 30 times as much on research on physical diseases as we do on mental health diseases at the National Institute of Mental Health. I think we've got to talk about that because we got an epidemic of shootings, of suicides, of depression, of opioids, all of which come back to mental health. Those are the 2 areas. Universal background checks, getting rid of things like bump stocks, and then going to deal with what are the underlying social issues that are causing this to happen.
Thank you. Zach.
Of course, people kill people, but guns also kill people, and what's happening now is that hate is killing people. Just this weekend, people went to a synagogue, their place of prayer and worship, to find sanctuary in this very scary world, in this crisis world we live in, and unfortunately, a Holocaust survivor died because of an AR-15. Now, I support the Second Amendment, and I am so glad that we have a lot of responsible gun owners here in this state. But at the same time, we have a crisis. We do not need military-grade weapons in our streets. We need to ban bump stocks. We need to create universal background checks. We need to go back to the Obama rules that made the people who were most severely mentally ill make sure that they're not able to get guns. Unfortunately, Angus voted to repeal that. we also need to make sure that we are actually tackling this problem and not leaving this problem to our kids who are in our schools.
Thank you. Before we move on, I want to go back through. You support banning bump stocks. Senator King, do you support banning? You do? Senator Brakey?
It's not going to fix the problem. It's a piece of plastic.
Thank you. Okay, the next question will start with Senator King, I believe. This made news this week. President Trump said that he may try to end birthright citizenship in this country. Is that a good idea? Why or why not? Senator King, we'll start with you.
Well, number one, I don't think any president should be able to amend the Constitution by executive order. I mean, can you imagine the furor that would be going on right now if Barack Obama had said, I think I'm going to amend the Second Amendment a little bit here on gun control? That's just unacceptable. It's unacceptable for President Obama or President Trump or whoever it is. So the idea that you can do that by executive order is ridiculous. Secondly, what he's proposing to do is just not consistent with the plain language of the of the 14th Amendment. And this morning on Fox News, Judge Napolitano, the Fox legal analyst, basically schooled the folks on Fox and Friends and said, no, this is fundamental, clear American law, and this is where you can't do this except by a constitutional amendment. That's the way we change the Constitution. If the president wants to do that, send a bill to Congress, and then it would go out to the states if Congress passes it.
Thank you. Zach?
Yes, we need to really just call this what it is, which is fear-mongering right before an election. This is meant to incite the base. This is meant to strike fear in the hearts of Americans who are struggling, who may not be making the wages that they deserve. And unfortunately, it's creating this nativist, racist fear that doesn't need to happen in this day and age. We need to choose love above hate. We need to make sure that we are actually looking at our Constitution and reading it. I have two brothers who have served. They went to the United States Naval Academy, and they've served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I just have to say, I am very disturbed by this. This president already is getting too much power. He has broadened his powers to a point that no other president has seen. He has broken the emoluments clause, and now he's trying to create an executive order that amends the Constitution. How ridiculous is this? I'm the only person in this race who has said that this president needs to be impeached and removed from office.
Thank you. Eric, should we end birthright citizenship?
Well, I've got my Constitution right here, and I think it's worthwhile to actually read what the 14th Amendment says. It says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. And, well, I think that, first of all, the 14th Amendment is a cornerstone of our Constitution. It helped us get through some very dark times in our country. But that phrase there, under the jurisdiction thereof, is important. It means something. You know, there has been judicial precedent establishing that if you are legally in this country, whether you're a citizen or non-citizen with a green card or a visa, yeah, you're under the jurisdiction. And if you have a child who's born here, that child is a citizen. But there has been no judicial precedent. There has been to establish that if you are a child of people who are here illegally, who did not have permission to be in this country, that you have automatic citizenship. Now, that's not to say I'm pretty skeptical of executive orders. I don't think that executive orders are the best way to do these things. I think these policies should be established by Congress, as it has been in the past. But to say that we have give automatic citizenship to the children of illegal immigrants, that's not supported by the Constitution.
Thank you, Eric. The next question, Zach Ringelstein, you'll start with this. Many Mainers are struggling with student debt burdens in the six-figure range. Many times income-based repayment methods don't even cover the principal, and the interest just grows and grows. So what can be done in Washington to try to avoid what many people feel will be the next financial bubble to pop?
Sure. So first and foremost, we need to make sure that none of our U.S. senators can take money from predatory student loan companies like Navient. Again, I respect Angus King, but he takes money from Navient and therefore is beholden. And we need to make sure that we're actually talking about the policies that can save us. Angus King added $82 billion to the war budget this year. Guess what we could get for $82 billion? Like this. We could get tuition-free public colleges and universities. Guess how much the tax bill cost? It cost $1.9 trillion, and we gave it all to the super rich. It would cost $1.4 trillion to forgive all student debt. We need to deal with this problem with sensible solutions instead of letting our U.S. senators take money from predatory student loan companies and allowing the rich to rig the system like they have. I've met way too many Mainers who are working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet, and can't pay off their student debt. It's sad. We need to change it. We need bold leadership.
Thank you. Eric.
Well, there's a couple of things wrapped in this, and I think the first thing we can do to help people who are in this situation is give people a full tax credit for what they pay towards paying off their student loans. That's a way that people can use their own money to pay off their student loans and to use that to count against the taxes that they would pay to Washington, D.C. instead. I think that that would be helpful. But we also need to recognize how we got into this problem in the first place. I know so many people in my generation, we were told growing up that it didn't matter how much it cost. It frankly didn't matter what you studied. You wanted to go to college and get a degree, and that's how you got a job at the end of the rainbow. But there weren't those jobs there. Frankly, a lot of people in my generation were steered in the wrong direction. We need to uplift again the power of vocational training and people learning how to work with their hands and learn practical skills. Frankly, we have a shortage of plumbers now. You can go to college and get $100,000 in debt and come out and be lucky to get a $30,000 a year job. Or you can go how to learn to be a plumber, and you could be making $100,000 a year your first year out. We need to have proper balance in this again.
Thank you. Senator King.
One of the first things that came on my plate when I went to Washington in the summer or in the winter of 2013 was student loans. The law was that the student loan interest rate was going to double that summer unless Congress did something. The Democrats had a bill, didn't go anywhere. Republicans had a bill, didn't go anywhere. A small group of us, bipartisan, Joe Manchin, Richard Burr, Tom Coburn, Lamar Alexander, and I, compromised, negotiated a bill, persuaded from the middle out, and it passed. And we got it through the House. The president signed it. They tell me that the calculation is that bill, that change in interest rates, has saved American students $50 billion over the past 6 years, several hundred million in Maine. So that's the kind of practical thing we can do. We also need to work on the income-based repayment plan, and we also have to talk about how much college costs, because if you have to borrow, it's the underlying cost that's the problem. And I think that's an area that we really have to focus on.
Senator, I'm going to give you 30 seconds because this has come up in other forums about do you take contributions from student loan companies?
A company that, and the important thing is the student loans come from the federal government. They're companies that manage the loans. A company called Navient gave me $1,000. You know, I don't know what percentage of that is, but the idea that somebody's bought me and can buy my vote is just frankly ridiculous. And it's just, you know, I don't vote in that way. I never have. I vote on what I think the people of Maine think is important to them.
Zach, go ahead.
It's not ridiculous to say that his vote is bought. That is the fundamental problem with our government right now. Is that it's
there that you have no knowledge
it's
of.
That I have absolutely knowledge of that.
I have voted with Navient on.
There's a Princeton study that shows that the wants and needs of the top 10% are represented in the U.S. Senate by their votes, and that the bottom 90% are not. And I have to say that the money you take
Tell that to the students that my vote from the work that I did saved $50 billion.
From Walmart,
Eric, do you want to
from
weigh?
ExxonMobil. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on.
Go ahead, Eric.
So I don't know if the donations to Senator King's campaign influences votes or not. What I do know is that he's voting in bad ways. He's voted to rack up $5 trillion in new debts on our generation. He ran as a fiscal conservative for governor. He left the state $1 billion in debt, and he's done the same thing on the national level. He was against the individual mandate as governor. Now he's for the individual mandate as a senator. He's kind of a lot of the ideals that he campaigned on in the past. He has completely not lived up to. He hasn't even been that good at being an independent.
Senator, I want to give you the last word before we move on to the new topic.
I think we've covered it. We'll keep going.
Okay, thank you. Eric Brakey, you'll get this question first. We're going to talk about trade. President Trump is a big advocate for reciprocal trade agreements, but right now we all know retaliatory tariffs from China are hurting Maine's lobster industry. Is pushing for trade reciprocity a good or bad thing? Why or why not, Eric?
Well, I think one thing we should get straight right from the beginning is we have been getting some very bad trade deals for a very long time. We have been taken advantage of by other nations. And frankly, some of the tough trade negotiations that President Trump has been engaging in have been working out to get better deals. We've got better deals now with Canada, with Mexico, with the European Union. China is still hanging out there, but I'm hopeful it won't be far too long. Of course, tariffs and these trade wars in the short run do have a negative negative consequence, and we shouldn't devalue that. But perhaps we can look at things like giving those people in affected industries, we can give them tax relief to help mitigate that until this trade war is over. But certainly, we need better trade deals. We are starting to get that, and people said that it wasn't going to happen with Mexico, it wasn't going to happen with Canada, it wasn't going to happen with the European Union, but we've gotten those better trade deals.
Senator.
I think we do need to negotiate better trade deals, and I've said that for a long time, and we've got to be able to protect our workers, our environment, and those kinds of issues. On the other hand, the question here is, how do you go about it? And the unanswered question, and frankly, we're all going to see what happens in the next year or so, is whether these very heavy-handed sort of sledgehammer approach, particularly to China, are going to be more beneficial than harmful, because right now they're being very harmful to the lobster industry, and the lobster industry is getting a double whammy. 20% of our exports of lobsters go to China. It was our most growing market. That's now essentially at a standstill. The second part of that is the steel tariffs on our neighbor Canada are making the cost of lobster traps go up. So when you start a trade war, you have to think 3 or 4 steps down. It's not just a question of, oh, we're going to put this tariff on and everybody will be happy, because there always is going to be retaliation. And the real question is China going to wave the white flag? If they do, we've won. If they don't, we're in trouble.
Thank you. Zach.
Donald Trump's trade wars are a complete and utter disaster, especially for the working people of this state. We know that the lobster industry is particularly affected by this. But I want to speak to trade in general, because this is something that we as people, as workers, as Democrats need to get better at. The truth of the matter is that NAFTA was written for the big corporations, for multinational corporations. Ask the loggers in the Allagash. Ask the lobstermen. Ask the 25,000 people who lost their jobs because of NAFTA. We need to start calling out these international trade agreements. Democrats and Republicans need to come together to write free trade agreements that actually work for the workers, not for the big companies and the stockholder profits.
Thank you, Zach. Our next question, we're going to start with Senator King. It's about the opioid crisis. Of course, our state and the nation in the grips of this crisis for years, stemming in part from the overprescription of opioids. What can lawmakers do to try to fix this problem? And how much responsibility do big pharmaceutical companies bear here?
I think big pharmaceutical companies bear a lot of responsibility, because 4 out of 5 new heroin users started with prescription drugs. I met a young man in southern Maine who had a football injury, shoulder hurt, shoulder injury, gave him too many of the pills. By the time he finished the bottle of pills, he was hooked. So that's got to be part of it. Treatment is the big deal right now. And the real tragedy is if someone's ready for treatment and they're told they have a 3-month waiting list, that's a death sentence. So that's, I think, one of the things that we have to do. And in one of the rare bursts of bipartisanship, the same week as the very contentious Kavanaugh hearings, the Senate passed a comprehensive opioid bill 99-1. And I think it's going to make a real difference in Maine. The other thing that we have to work on is not a legal thing, but it's the stigma. We have to understand that there is such a thing as recovery, that it works, and that people who are in recovery can work and be productive citizens. They have to be able to rent apartments and get jobs. That's got to be part of the solution as well. I'm optimistic about the effects of the bill that we just passed.
Thank you. Zach Ringelstein.
418 Mainers died last year because of this opioid epidemic in our state. This is an epidemic, no less. And our own governor, Governor LePage, has said that people who are dealing with this are just prolonging their own death. What a disgrace. We need to actually solve this problem, and we need to solve it with not only safe injection sites, with needle exchanges, with free or affordable rehabilitation centers, making sure there are more beds for people. But we also need to solve it by making sure that your representatives in the U.S. Senate aren't taking money from pharmaceutical companies. And I believe that we can hold the pharmaceutical companies accountable once and for all. Again, I'm the only person in this race who's pledged not to take it. Yesterday or 2 days ago, we were able to ask Angus King on stage and he said that he would stop taking money from ExxonMobil and from the fossil fuel industry. So,
thank you.
Senator King, will you stop taking money from pharmaceutical companies as well?
I'm not bought by anybody, Zach. I'm doing the work of the people of Maine, and for you to suggest that is just an insult. And you know, I've got 22,000 different donations. 82% of them are less than $100, and 65% of them come from people in Maine. So
over $1 million from corporate PACs, just to be very clear. So those are direct from corporations who are writing the bills and then donating to hold a carrot over our senator's head.
It's unfortunately. There's nothing to it.
Let's go to Eric. Opioids.
If they're trying to buy my vote, they're doing a damn poor job, because I voted against the pharmaceutical industry on practically every turn.
Eric Brakey, go ahead.
Well, I think that there are a lot of politicians tripping over themselves to pretend that they know how to fix this problem. And the truth is, politicians are always looking for simple answers to complex problems. There are things that government can do to help. I've actually been, as the Senate chairman for the Health and Human Services Committee, on the front lines of this in Augusta for the last 4 years. And we can do things like making treatment available, making harm reduction strategies like making naloxone available over the counter. And I've done those things as a state senator. But frankly, the idea that government is going to be able to fix this, government can only tackle the symptoms of the problem. The real underlying problem here, the root of it, is that people are hopeless. People are going through their lives without a sense of purpose, and they're numbing that with drugs that are destroying themselves. You know, but government can't give you a purpose. No politician can give you a purpose. In fact, most politicians, their purpose you serve for them is to reelect them. But purpose comes from work, from our communities, from our families, from spiritual life. That's where we need to focus on helping people find the purpose, to get motivated, to do the hard work, to break the grip of opioid addiction.
Thank you. Still on the topic of healthcare, Zach, we'll start with you with another question that we acknowledge is impossible to answer in 60 seconds. The Affordable Care Act is the law of the land. Open enrollment starts today. But for many Mainers, healthcare coverage is far from affordable. What, if any, changes would you try to make to that law?
So my wife, family, and we actually use the Affordable Care Act. We're on the marketplace. And when my wife was getting ultrasounds for our recent pregnancy for our campaign baby, Jack, who was born on the trail this year, it wasn't covered. I mean, how ridiculous that in the richest country on earth it wasn't covered. And healthcare is a human right. I had a student who died a few years ago because of lack of access to basic health care. We pay the most per capita of any country in the world on health care, and yet we have the worst results of any developed economy. We need Medicare for all now. We need a single payer system now. We need someone fighting for it now. I'm the only person on this stage who is fighting for Medicare for all. Because I am not bought, I'm willing to go there and fight. This will be my #1 issue. Over 70% of Americans support Medicare for all, and over 50% of Republicans support Medicare for all. We need to be represented. We need to solve this crisis.
Thank you. Eric, the ACA.
So first, I would vote to repeal Obamacare and replace it with freedom. I think that that's where the answers lie for our broken healthcare system. Now, Obamacare didn't break our healthcare system by itself. Our healthcare system was broken long before this. But the situation we have is special interests standing between us and our doctors, whether that be big government bureaucrats or big corporate insurance executives. It used to be in our country we were able to have a direct one-to-one relationship with our doctors, and no more. Our small family practices are being bought up as the healthcare bureaucracy gets so expensive to deal with that everyone has to sell out to big hospitals. We need to focus on solutions that inject price and competition and choice for people. Things like allowing people to save tax-free through health savings accounts, to buy insurance across state lines to increase choice and competition, to allow people to band together and collectively bargain and through health associations to get more leverage with insurance companies. Both of my opponents want government to control your health care decisions. Zach has a nice name for it. Angus doesn't seem to know what to call it yet. But I'm the only person in this race who wants to restore freedom and choice in health care.
Thank you. Angus.
Your specific question, as I recall, was about the Affordable Care Act. I voted to maintain it because I think it has done a good job of filling a gap. That is, people who aren't in a company, who don't have company-paid health insurance, and who aren't on Medicare or Medicaid, and it helps them get that coverage. The first thing I would do is insist that the administration quit sabotaging it. You talked about today is the opening day of open enrollment. Open enrollment this year is half of what it was 2 years ago. The administration arbitrarily cut that in half. They're not doing the advertising that they used to do, and they've cut the funding for the navigators, the people who help people to go through this process. They cut that funding something like 80%. So I think that's where you start. I also believe that health care is a human right, and it's important, and you can't enjoy any of the other rights if you don't have health care. But to me, the Affordable Care Act was an important building block. I'm not ready to go to Medicare for all, because that basically replaces the current system with one big government system. Eric will be happy to hear me say that. But I do think we need to work in that direction.
Eric wants a rebuttal. Go ahead, Eric.
I just want to say, you know, when all the problems that have existed in Cuba and Venezuela, everyone always in those countries says, well, the reason it's falling apart is because of sabotage. Well, really, it's because socialism doesn't work. We have seen this take place across the world, country after country, and it doesn't work in healthcare either. In the UK, people are being denied access to routine treatment because they're said, well, you're a smoker, you're obese, and we don't have enough resources. Government is picking and choosing, deciding who gets care and who doesn't. That's not the future for healthcare we should have here in America. I want you to be in charge of your healthcare.
We'll go to Zach, then we'll get back to you.
So this line of argumentation is ridiculous in 2018. Our neighbors are dying. People are paying a second mortgage for health care in the richest country on earth. Health care, Medicare for all, is not quote-unquote socialism. It is just right and moral. And by the way, I want to just add, are our libraries an entitlement and socialism? Are our firefighters an entitlement or socialism? And by the way, we can't deal with 20th century solutions in the 21st century. None of this incrementalism. We need to fight for Medicare for all, or else we're never going to get it.
Angus?
Eric, I believe in markets. I'm an entrepreneur. But healthcare is not a market. You don't know the price, you don't know the quality. It's hard to make those assessments. You're saying no insurance company, no government, everybody's going to do their own bargaining. So you have a heart attack, you're in the ambulance on the way. Are you going to? I just don't understand the practical ability to bargain or to negotiate or to choose your health care, because it just doesn't work that way.
Eric, last word.
So, certainly, if you have a heart attack and you have something unexpected comes up, that's why you have insurance. But insurance does so many things more today that, frankly, insurance isn't very good at. If your car insurance covered every time you filled up at the gas tank or needed an oil change, well, every time you go to a gas station, you wouldn't be able to know what the prices are. And frankly, you would get there and you would get a bill a month later and find out it's exorbitant rates. We don't have price competition. We don't have transparency. The way that you get transparency is you empower regular people to be the customers of their own health care again. You force the healthcare providers to have to cater to regular people. That's how we get it done.
Thank you. All right, this is our last question. We're going to start with Eric Brakey, and we'll have a quick yes-no lightning round after this. But the last question with 1-minute responses. Eric, tell us about a time you were wrong about a policy position and changed your mind.
Well, certainly. I used to support the death penalty. And as I thought more and more about it, I realized government makes mistakes all the time in our criminal justice system. It's a very flawed system. And frankly, giving the government control to decide who lives or dies, especially when we've seen things go wrong so often. That's an issue where, frankly, I've changed my mind over time. I've also changed my mind on a lot of the foreign policy. I used to cheer and applaud when we went into Iraq, and I thought we were liberating so many people. But you know what? Years later, I find out that so many people died, and there was we destabilized the region. We made things worse. Now I support an America First foreign policy. I think that we need to defend our country. We need to not be trying to nation build in countries over abroad. I think we actually need to bring that money home that we send overseas to invest in infrastructure and Social Security and American priorities here. We send far too much money overseas on wars that never end. We send welfare to foreign aid to countries that don't like us very much and burn our flag. It's time to put America first.
Senator King.
All of my life, I've sort of thought that things like a balanced budget amendment was an artificial, it was a gimmick, it really wasn't necessary. As I've lived through the past dozen years, though, it appears to me that it's too easy to cut taxes and too easy to spend money. And our political system just doesn't seem to be up to it. And what I hark back to is the states. The states aren't allowed to print money. So they have to balance their budget every year. Every state in America does it. It's hard, and sometimes you have to go in and do supplemental budgets, and you have to fill in the gaps, and you have to maybe cut some expenditures or do whatever you have to do. But the states do it. Why can't the federal government do it? That's why I am coming to the place where I think we need some mechanism, a constitutional amendment that says we have to have a balanced budget.
Zach.
So I grew up believing that free market capitalism was the only way and was the only reason that America prospered. But when I studied history, I learned that actually it was through our great leadership of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who, and by the way, Eisenhower, a Republican, who told us through their actions that unchecked capitalism not only doesn't grow our economy, but is going to kill us. If we want a great society, a great America, a society that is truly prosperous, let's look at our heroes. Let's look at FDR and his New Deal. Let's look at his idea of freedom from want. Let's look at his Rural Electrification Act. Let's look at the Interstate Highway Act. These were all investments by the federal government into the people. That's Social Security, that's Medicare, and we need this. And by the way, if we don't have unchecked capitalism and start to do some of these programs, then we are not going to have a safe and healthy planet, because climate change will have the final word and is an existential threat to humanity itself.
Thank you. We're running out of time. We're going to do a couple of quick yes/no. I'm going to start with Zach and work my way down, just because I feel like we had a lot of Eric first questions because of the rotation here. First one, yes or no, do you support a woman's right to have access to a safe and legal abortion?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm pro-life.
Second question.
Is that a no? That's a no.
It means I think that it should be decided on the state level.
The choice we were given was yes or no.
Is it a yes or no?
I'm pro-life. I think that should be decided on the state level and not by Washington, D.C.
Again, we'll start with Zach. Should our nation end Citizens United? That's a Supreme Court decision that allows political committees to collect and spend limitless campaign contributions.
Yes, it is one of the most important things we can do.
Yes.
Yes. I'm a
Eric.
co-sponsor of the bill.
It would violate free speech. No.
So, no. For whom did you vote for president in 2016? Zach.
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton.
Donald Trump.
Thank you. This is a ranked choice voting election on Tuesday. I think the final question we're going to get to is, will you accept the results, Zach?
Yes, and I'm going to rank me first and Angus second, by the way.
Yes.
We'll see how it turns out.
You're not committing to accepting the results?
Oh, I'm committing to seeing how it turns out.
Okay. We are just about out of time. Thank you all three for joining us. Zach Ringelstein, Angus King, Eric Brakey. You've been watching a debate between the candidates who want to be your next U.S. Senator. I'm Paul Merrill. We'll have a full recap of this afternoon's debate coming up tonight, first at 4. Don't forget, Election Day is on Tuesday. Please go exercise your right to vote and stick with us for coverage between now and Election Day, and probably after, depending on how the day shakes out. Thanks for watching. Have a good afternoon. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you, Paul.